Hello, everybody, and welcome to Lesson 6, Date and Time Functions, here in Numbers. Now, there's a lot of different functions, and these are only some of them. This is based off of the type of function being categorized by date in the support article Google has out there. Now, this is a static group, so there might be some new ones whenever you watch this video. I did make a way or a method using import HTML and the query function to pull all of the different functions and their types. So you can take a look at that if you're interested in that. Otherwise, these are the ones. Now, we're not going to go through all of these because that would take a very long time. But there's a lot of important ones. Ones that I would say that to note, and some that we will be using, is that you can basically pull different aspects of a date and or time based off of the year or the month or the second, or there's also some like time value, weekday, week num, time, minute, hour, so on. And there are other ones like network days where you can set the different days that people should be working. And you can also have some with different customizations of weekends and holidays, things like that. And there's a lot more. So I encourage you to take a look at that just so you know what functions are out there. But in this one, we're going to take a look at some methods here with some data. Now, in this data, I wanted to make sure that we're understanding one of the principles here. And this one has a start date. There is a date included that is essentially the start date, but a little different, and the end date. Now, if you click into any of these dates, you can actually see what's stored there. So this one actually has a timestamp too, whereas this one does not. So if you change the formatting of this to a number, Control-Shift-1, you can see that the whole numbers, 45,264, are the same, but there's a difference in the end there, or the decimal points. So I'm just doing Control-Z to undo. And so that's where this 10 a.m. comes from. 12 p.m. would be stored as 0.5, or half a day. And so that makes sense that this is like 0.43 something. This one was 0, which by default and just in general, it's going to be midnight if there is no time included in the date. So that's super important to note, especially for things like finding the date open. Now, transitioning to some of the questions, I have a few here. We might not get through all of them in this, or I might kind of abbreviate some of these, but for this first one, create dates open by using the end dates. Let's go ahead and go back, and all you need to do is end date minus the start date. Push enter, and you might have this autofill, so Control enter to bring it all the way down. Now, I wanted to note, if we switch this to the start date, A2, you can see there's a little bit different number, and that's actually because it's taken into consideration. You can see that these aren't actually whole numbers, and that's because it's taking the decimal number here. So that's kind of like that 4.3 something, which is the 10 o'clock, and subtracting it from here. Now, this could be more accurate if both the end date and start date had timestamps, but this one, in this example data set, which is like a kind of like ticket grouping for, IT, I don't usually close tickets at midnight, and so I'm going to use inference that this probably will not be as accurate. And so using just the date and not the date time would definitely be more important and more accurate. Moving on, which day of the week has the most tickets? We can use a function called weekday that shows the day of the week as a number. So go to the date, push enter, and that would be number 2. Now, how this is shown is that by default, if you click in here, is Sunday equals 1, so Monday equals 2, Wednesday or Tuesday is 3, and so on. And if you click into here, this is Monday. So that checks out. You can actually switch this if you wanted to actually spell out the day. You can do text of this number, and the format in parentheses, you can do D, and that would do the number. DD would be 2 of the numbers, so 01. DDD would show the abbreviation of the word Monday or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, etc. Or 4Ds would show the entire word. So I'm just going to do that. Click that twice, and it'll fill it down. So Monday, this should be Tuesday. Yep. All those are the same. Wednesday, so on. So that gives us the day of week. Next is which week has the most tickets created, and then which month has the most tickets created. Now, I guess I should have answered that question completely here. If you highlight it, you can then insert a chart, and that chart will show you which one has the most. So we can use a pie chart. You can also use the count of days a week. I mean, really, this one's better in almost every situation. And some people like pie charts better, but, it's this. And so to answer that question, Thursday has the highest count. I would note that these all seem similar, and Friday's less. Maybe it's because people are more happy on Fridays because they're excited for the weekend. Thus, less tickets are in. Who knows? But in any case, let's go back to this next question, which is which week and month has the most. Let's do week, month, and kind of combine these two together. So in week, you can actually say week num, which will be the number of week. This says in the year. Now, I'm going to push enter. It's going to give you a number, but do note that it doesn't matter which year it is. For example, if you change this into, 2024, that's going to be the same week number. So I'm going to do undo based off, or it doesn't change based off of the year. So it might be important too to include the year, and you can use the year of this date here. Because again, the week of year number 2023 will be a lot different than the week number 49 of 2024. Similarly to month, you might also want to include the year. Again, depending on the question, you may or may not need to. So if you do equal, and if you do month of this date, you'll get a different month. Now it goes 12 for December, 1 for that, 2, so on. And you might want to actually have it spell out like December or January, February. So let's say that we use that text again. Do you think that'll work? Text of this month? Well, that kind of random question and leaving a pause might indicate, no, it won't. It'll actually be January for all of it. Copy and paste it down. It's all January. Why? Well, it's pulling this here. So the month is 12. And all of these are going to be like 1 through 12, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, or 12. You'll see there's a lot of Januaries, there's some Decembers, and Januaries again. Why? Well, this is actually taking this number 12 and assuming this is the date, number 12. So if you look at the value of 12, it's actually stored as a date. And so if you switch that, that's actually going to be 1/11/1900. And if you go all the way back to date or day number 1, that's going to be December. And so that's where all of these are January, except for this one that's December's. And that's because that is formatted as 1. 1 is going to be December, the rest are there. And that's just not how you're supposed to do it. We actually overcomplicated this. All that you need is the text of this date and then push enter, because that's taking into account this date number, which would be what? Like 46,246. And so when you look at that, it knows that's December. And so that's what we need to do. Text of this, and then month, 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 month. Now, again, as I mentioned, December of 2023 would look different than December of 2024. So if your data set has multiple years, you might want to combine these two different formulas in order to be able to say December of whatever year. And so if you want to do something like that, you can actually copy this formula, and then you can put an ampersand or the and sign, and maybe you want to say December of, and then another ampersand, and then you can do this one right here. Oops, that's okay. Let me just push enter. just going to copy this year of B2. So December of ampersand year. And if you take this and bring it down, that'll give a clear distinguisher of January of what year. And again, you could, pull calculations on it, things like that. Now, going back to what it was asking, you can, of course, use a chart and see which count is there. Just make sure the x-axis is that, aggregate it, which means it'll count it. Sometimes it automatically does sum, so you want to count it because the sum of like week 49, or let's say 50 times 3 would be 150, whereas 3 ones would be 3. So you want to do count, and that gives them more accurate. So it looks like week number 4 is the highest amount of tickets. And again, go to series, data labels to show it, but again, you can kind of see it there. Same for the December. If you want to do that one, you can highlight it, insert, chart, and we can see January has the most, June has the least, which again, you might want to see why it has the least. Maybe it's because it's a partial month, but again, however you want it, but that kind of shows it. So we did those two. The bonus would be, would there be a way to calculate the month and the year? Well, I kind of answered it there. So that's the month or and year, however you want to put it. So now you can find the number of months a ticket was open in. Now, this question does take a little bit more time to answer because you can't just subtract the 2 months, especially if it's in multiple years. Now, if you're assuming that the years are only like 2023 to 2024, something like that, like it's just a quarter or an annual type of thing, then this formula could work. You would have to update it and make it a little more complex to account for multiple years, like if a ticket could be open for 4 years or something like that. I hope something wouldn't be. What you would do, assuming that the years would be different, is you would do the end date minus the start date. Now, in that, you want it to actually be the text or the month of it, which we do instead of text, month, because you don't want to like subtract December from January because that doesn't make sense. We want number values. So month minus the month. You can see here, that seems to work up to this point right here where it's negative. And that is because this is 12/25, whereas this is 24. And so in that, you'd actually want it to show 1 month. So if it's greater than 0, then you'd actually want to add another 12 to it. So what you could do is make a logical expression. So if this equals 0, then what's the value? 0. If it doesn't equal 0, we want to take this value and add 12 to it. And so that'll count. If it's a 0, it's going to stay 0. And then these ones are going to switch to 1. So let's click it and bring it down. So some of them are like 13. So let's take a look here. Because it's the same year. So that one, even though it's not 0, it still added 12, even though it's the same year. So let's change this a little bit. So instead, let's say if the year equals the year, then, so if the years equal, then just do month minus month, because that should always work. So then if the years don't equal, then we'll do it this way. So let's see if that works. So it does there, and then let's go down. That's 1. Let's double check. So 1, 2, there we go. Okay, so that logic seems to make more sense and does account for those. Again, it might not always account for, let's say that one is like, further. So let's say this one is 2026. That should be a lot more. What you could do is the years. So you want to do this times the years. So year minus this. Let's see. So that would be 3. So it'd be 36. Let's see. So it worked here. Let's see if it works here. So I'm just going to move this down. Let's add a year to it. So normally it's 1. So now it should add, what, another 12? Because it goes through a year. So it'd be like 1 month plus a year. So it should be 13. So let's just bring this down. 13, yeah. And then those ones stay the same. So copy, paste it down. So that does account for multi-year. So really, that gets to it, and that's where it's getting complex. Again, there's methods to do it. So finally, can you pull us the timestamp from any date fields? And we kind of looked at this earlier. It comes down to when you click into it, if it has a timestamp to it, then yes, you can. If it doesn't, while it shows a timestamp, it would just be midnight or 0. And so, no, you can't pull a timestamp like if it doesn't include it, although you can still see it. You can still see a timestamp. It'll just be midnight or 0, which also indicates no timestamp, unless you happen to have the date be exactly midnight, which the majority of the time you see that, it just means it doesn't have it. So ultimately, that question's answer is no, but you can technically still format it to show nothing, which would be 0. So anyway, kind of getting into the rambling points, I'm going to end it here. Hopefully this helps. Again, these can get complicated. You can kind of see here with the number of months. That's a pretty complicated formula using an if statement, although when you look at it and you kind of break it down, it makes sense. But again, as you start to work with these, as long as you get those basic concepts, that 1 is a day, a full day, and then time is less, it starts to kind of fit together and make sense. So hopefully you find this helpful. Thank you for watching. Do those social things, and we'll see you in the next video.